Good afternoon. Welcome to Grade 12 English First Additional Language. Today we're going to have a look at conditionals, that is if sentences, and conjunctions. I would recommend that you sit with your book and your notes, that you can highlight and add notes while I'm explaining. It's a beautiful day to learn something new, so here we go. We start with if sentences. Now, we have three types. We have the first conditional, or the first type, where your if sentence is in the present tense, and then you add will, can, may, or must plus your verb. Look at the example. If I go to London, that's in the present tense, I will see the Big Ben. So I add will, can, may, or must. If I go to Buckingham Palace, in the present tense, I can take a photo. So again, you add will, shall, may, or can. So your first type of if sentence, the if clause is in the present tense, and then for your main clause, you add will, shall, may, or can. If I feel sick tomorrow, present tense, I will not go to school. If it rains, present tense, the match will be cancelled. Now, we use this type of sentence when something is likely or probable. If the condition is fulfilled, it is sure to happen. If the weather is as sunny tomorrow as it was today, we will go surfing. So that's your first conditional. The second conditional, if your if clause is in the past simple tense, then you use would, could, might, and your verb. If I were an astronaut, I would travel in a spaceship. If I went to Mars, I would meet a Martian. So remember, your if clause is in the past tense, and then your main clause would be you add would, could, should, or might plus your basic form of the verb. So past tense, the second conditional is past tense plus would, could, should, might plus your basic form of the verb. Let's quickly think about the first one again. Your if sentence is in the present tense, so plus will, shall, may, or can. Your second type is in the past tense, would, could, should, or might. So if he were a bird, past tense, he would fly across the harbor. If I had, past tense, $200,000, now I would buy a car. The second conditional or the second type is something that is unlikely, improbable, impossible, or imaginary. So it's to speak about present and future situations which are unlikely to happen. If I had any money, I would lend it to you. Past tense, and then would, could, should, and might. Now the third type or the third conditional is if your if clause is in the past perfect tense, then you use would have, could have, might have plus your past participle. So if your if sentence is in the past perfect tense, you use would have, could have, should have, or might have. If I had studied. Now that is what we did in the previous lesson about the tenses. I told you, if you see the perfect tense and you remember past perfect, it's always the word had. So that is why the lesson on tenses is important. You use it in every other aspect of your language work. If I had studied hard, past perfect, I would have passed my exams. If you had studied hard, you wouldn't have failed your exam. Right, so if your if clause is in the past perfect tense, you use would have, could have, should have, or might have. If I had enough money, I would have bought the camera yesterday. If I had come home earlier, I would not have missed the program. So, and when do we use this third conditional? It is something that is impossible. We imagine what would have happened if things had been different. If they'd gone by bus, they would have arrived much later. Remember, they'd is they had gone by bus. They would have arrived much later, but they didn't go by bus. So it's something that is impossible. What would have happened if things had been different? He would have traveled around the world if he had more money. It's impossible to change because he did not have the money. Right, if we have a look at the conjunctions, we are going to work with specific conjunctions, that is after, when, before, and as soon as. And the same rule apply for all of them. So it's after, when, before, as soon as. After, when, before, as soon as. The same rule apply. The first thing you need to do is you always have to determine which of the two actions happen first in time. So that's your step one. Right, and as you know, we have different tenses and the sentences can be in different tenses. In this case, when the sentences are in the present tense, you have to remember the following. The action that happens first must be in the present perfect tense. Has for singular, have for plural, plus the third column. The action that happens second must be in the present indefinite tense. So step one, always determine which of the two actions happen first. Step two, determine in which tense is this sentence. If it's in the present tense, you need to remember your first action is always in the present perfect tense. If you remember the previous lesson, present perfect always has and have. Has for singular, have for plural. How do I know has is for singular? I remember the S rule. S that stands for singular. Everything with an S in it is applicable to the S rule and can be applied to a singular noun. Right, plus your third column. Then the action that happens second is your present indefinite or your present simple tense. Let's look at the example. The spider catches its prey, it eats it. You have to use the word after to combine the two sentences. Now, step one, determine which action is first. Now, the first action, I think, would be the spider catches its prey. And what do we know? That first action must change to the present perfect plus the third column. So, catches will change to has caught. So, the spider is one thing. It's singular. That's why we use has. And the third column of catch is caught. The second action changed to the present indefinite and it stays it eats it. So it's present indefinite. So you start with the word after. After the spider has caught its prey, it eats it. Right, so always determine which of the two actions happen first in time. Then you determine whether it's in the present tense or in the past tense. If it's in the present tense, your first action, present perfect plus third column. Second action, present indefinite. Start with the word after. After the spider has caught its prey, it eats it. When, however, your sentence is in the past tense, the following rules apply. Again, the same thing. You have to determine which action happens first. Then you have to determine which tense it is. You see this sentence is in the past tense, and then you have to remember this rule. The action that happens first must be in the past perfect. Now, according to our lesson in the previous day, past perfect always had, whether it's singular or plural. So the rule says the action that happens first must be in the past perfect plus the third column. So it's had plus the third column. Your action that happens second must be written in the past indefinite. Now your example here, James saw the spider. He killed it with a newspaper. Right. Step 1, let's determine which action happens first. James saw the spider, he killed it. I think he saw the spider before he killed it. So James saw the spider was your first action. Right. Which tense is it? You look at the verb. So the word saw and killed tells you we are working in the past tense. Now, so your first action must change to the past perfect plus the third column. Now, see, saw, seen is your third column plus had, so it's had seen. And then your second action must be in the past indefinite. He killed it with a newspaper. And then you have to start with as soon as. So as soon as James had seen the spider, he killed it with a newspaper. Right, let's quickly recap. This is now conjunctions, and the conjunctions we are working with is after, when, before, as soon as. After, when, before, as soon as. Step 1, determine which of the two actions happens first in time. Step 2, you have to check to determine in which tense are we working. If we're working in the present tense, my first action must change to the present perfect. So has for singular, have for plural, plus the third column. And then my second action must change to the present indefinite. So if we look at the example again, the spider catches its prey, it eats it. My first action is the spider catches its prey, present perfect. The spider is only one, so we're going to use has. Start with after. After the spider has caught its prey, the second part, present indefinite, it eats it. If, however, my sentence is in the past tense, my first action must be in the past perfect, had plus third column. Remember, we use had whether my noun is or my subject is singular or plural. So past perfect, James saw the spider. So James, as soon as James had seen the spider, my second action must be in the past indefinite. He killed it with a newspaper. Right, so those two rules for the present and the two rules for the past you have to know off by heart in order to do the sentences about these conjunctions correctly. Right, if we have a look at since. If there is only one verb in the sentence, you use the perfect tense. So present perfect, since March, I have studied a lot. Only one verb, have studied. Past perfect, since that day, he had never seen her again. Your verb seen. And the present perfect continuous, since this morning, she has been reading. Do you see how many times we use the tenses that we did in the previous lesson? So remember the rule for since. If there's only one verb in the sentence, you use the perfect tense, whether it's present perfect or past perfect or present perfect continuous. So if you see the word since, again, take out your highlighter, highlight your verbs. If you only see one verb, you use the perfect tense. If, however, you have two verbs in the sentence, again, you have a first action, usually the one nearest to since, and the second action, which you are going to write in the present perfect tense. So your first action is in the past indefinite and your second action present perfect. So let's look at an example. Since it rained, the plants have grown. So we have two verbs, rained and have grown. So my rule says my first action, the closest one to since, must be past indefinite, since it rained. Remember, past indefinite, same as past simple. The plants have grown, present perfect. We use have because the plants are plural. And that's why we use in the present perfect tense, we use have or has. In this case, we use have plus the third column. Right, the next example, since I saw him in Cape Town, I haven't been able to forget him. So it's saw and forget. So since I saw him, it is my past indefinite tense. I haven't been able to forget him. Haven't been is my present perfect tense. Then, if we have to join multiple subjects with or, either or, neither nor, not only, but also, not and but, you have to remember the following rule. Look at the noun closest to the verb. And this is where they ask you, correct the single mistake in the following sentence. Then they use the incorrect verb. They will use a verb for a plural noun instead of a singular noun, where it should be the other way around. So look at the example. Neither the teacher nor the children are playing outside. Now, you see there are two nouns, teacher and children, in this sentence. And then you can't decide whether it should be is playing outside or are playing outside. Now you have to remember this. For or, either or, neither nor, not only, but also, not and but, look at the noun closest to the verb. So you have to learn this off by heart. Because now you have to look at the children. Because the teacher is a singular noun and the children is a plural noun. But children is the closest to the verb. Thus, we are using the verb are playing. So when they put it in that question, correct the single mistake, they will say neither the teacher nor the children is playing outside. And then you must remember this rule that you have to look at the noun closest to the verb. Right, with, together with, like, including, as well as, the rule is different. Look at the first noun in the sentence. So, the teacher together with the children. Again, you have teacher as a noun. You have children as a noun. And how do I know? That must be is, because I have to look at the first noun in the sentence. That is my first noun. I see it as singular, so that must be is staying inside. Right, so very important. Or, either or, neither nor, not only, but also, not and but. You have to look at the noun closest to the verb. So a tip here, highlight your two nouns, remember your rule, and then you will choose the correct verb. With, together with, like, including, as well as, look at the first noun in the sentence. Again, highlight your two nouns. Remember your rule. Look at the first noun in the sentence. And then you see teacher is a singular noun, so your verb must be singular. Right, if we look at a few examples from old papers that I looked up, he books accommodation, he starts his tour. So obviously it's a conjunction. You have to combine these two sentences with the word after. Right, and then now we must go back and remember when the sentence is, what do we do first? We have to determine which action is first. Now, obviously, he has to book the accommodation before he can start his tour. So that is our first action. And then we must remember the rule. If the sentence is in the present tense, our first action must be in the present perfect tense. So it's has or have plus your third column. So we start with after he has. Why do we say has? Because he is singular. Booked accommodation, our second action, is in the present indefinite. He starts his tour. Do you see why it's so very important that you know that rule? Right, the second sentence. His passport expired. He renewed it. Right, we have the word when. We remember the same rule counts for after, when, before, as soon as. So his passport expired, he renewed it. Now, which action happened first? Obviously, the passport expired. Now we have to determine the tense. The expired and renewed tells us it's in the past tense. And then we remember when the sentence is in the past tense, the first action must be in the past perfect. So it's had plus the third column. And our second action must be the past indefinite. So when his passport had expired, he renewed it. The past indefinite there. Then they arrange his tour, he departs. Again, which action is first? Obviously, arranging the tour. Is it present or past tense? This is present tense. We remember our first action must be in the present perfect plus third column. So it must be has or have. Now, they is plural. So we're going to use have plus the third column. And then our second action must be in the present indefinite tense. So it will be they have arranged his tour. After they have arranged his tour, he departs. Right, the next one. He says goodbye to his friends. He embarks on his journey, and that is since. So we have two verbs. Says goodbye, says, and embarks. And we have to remember when we have two verbs, our first action, nearest to since, must be in the past indefinite, and our second action in the present perfect. So our sentence is going to look like this. Since he said goodbye in the past indefinite to his friends, he has embarked in the present perfect. Okay, he has because he is singular. The man takes his wheelbarrow. He fills it with gravel. Again, we have two verbs. So our first action nearest to since must be in the past indefinite, and our second action in the present perfect. So since the man took his wheelbarrow, past indefinite, he has filled it, present perfect. Now, if sentences, if we have a look at that. So if you behave rudely, your mother, now you have to choose what will come there. Will, would, what are we going to put in there? And now we have to remember the types of if sentences that we have. So if you behave rudely, now this is in the present tense, And we remember, if my if sentence is in the present tense, I must use will, shall, may, or can. So, if you behave rudely, your mother will be very upset. The second sentence, if I made a mistake like that, my parents be very displeased. The word made tells us it's in the past tense. Now I remember that's my second type or my second conditional. So if my if sentence is in the past tense, if I made a mistake, then I must use would, could, should, or might and the basic form of the verb. So it would read, if I made a mistake like that, my parents would be very displeased. Then, I am convinced in retrospect that we find the rec if we search a little deeper. Look at the word order here. They just move the if part to the back. So, if we search a little deeper, that tells us it's in the present tense, so we must use will find. So I'm convinced in retrospect that we will find the rec if we search a little deeper. So to determine your tense, if you get it like this, where you have to fill in the correct form of the verb, please take a look at the verb closest to the word if. Then, if your mother knew what you were doing at this moment, she... And then the word knew tells us it is past tense, and we know by now we must use would. She would be terribly shocked. And if you are more tolerant towards your spouse, tells us it's present tense, he will be more pleasant to live with. Okay, now I know there's a lot of uncertainty in our country right now. And none of us knows what the future holds. But I want to encourage you to remain diligent with your schoolwork and to keep a positive outlook on life and to once in a while sit back and find something that makes you laugh. Laughter makes everything better. Always remember, there's a lot of people supporting you, and there's always, but always, a teacher who believes in you. So this concludes my lessons for English FAL for this Wolkskool. I sincerely hope that all of you enjoyed it as much as I did. Have a wonderful afternoon. Make wise choices. God bless. Goodbye.